Hey, family. Wendy Marcel Fitzwilliam is a friend. I met her a while ago, and I've recently come to just enjoy so much of what she's about. She's a Trinidadian lawyer, actress, model, singer, TV host, and a beauty queen who won Miss Universe in 1998. We're going to talk a little bit about that. She was the second Miss Universe in history from Trinidad and Tobago and was the third woman of African heritage to capture this crown. More importantly, she's visiting with us from her home, and I can hardly wait for you to enjoy the spirit and the love she shares with us from it. Wendy. Wendy, it's so great to see you again. How are you?
I am well, Janice. It's wonderful to be with you. I'm
Well,
so looking forward to our chat today.
oh, girl. Listen, as a fan, I feel as though we already know each other much more intimately than we do. And I know we're about to have just another great conversation. We have a lot to talk about because everybody wants to know, where did all of this come from, Miss Wendy? So let's start with young Wendy. Start with young Wendy. Tell us what your childhood was like and what it was like for you, your sister, and your family growing up in Trinidad and Tobago.
Sure, Janice. I would like to think that I had a very typical Trinidadian upbringing, very working class or middle class rather. My dad was a fireman, a fire officer by the time I was born. My mom a teacher. Both of them very humble beginnings, but they were married for 10 years before they had my sister and I. So they were quite settled in their careers, relatively advanced in their careers, and very sure of who they were, as it were. So
Rather like my husband and I, Wendy.
really,
Yes.
okay,
Bernie and I
yes,
were
yes,
really
yes.
secure in our careers and our relationship before our children came.
We were really a very close-knit family, very, very close-knit family. Trinidad is very diverse, culturally, ethnically, and because we're tiny, a twin island country, relatively small, there isn't the separation you have, like, say, on a continent. So even though you have lots of holidays in America celebrating everyone, not everyone celebrates everyone else's holiday. Because I lived in the US for a while too. And there were lots of fabulous Jewish holidays, for example. But if you were not Jewish, you didn't know so much about it, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Because we are tiny, we did it all. So I was very accustomed to celebrating Eid al-Fitr and Hussein and a lot of the Muslim and Hindu festivals, Diwali, etc. And my parents always made us think, my sister and I, that we can be and do whatever we wanted to. So that's why I thought I could be a glamorous lawyer and
Well,
and when the
Wendy, what
time
actually,
came, a beauty
what
queen, a
actually,
model, everything under the sun.
what the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve.
Absolutely.
So what
Absolutely.
influenced you, though, in particular? What influenced you to become a lawyer?
I always, initially television, I will be quite honest. I grew up in the era of Matlot, and there were a few British shows on television here in Trinidad as a child. And I just liked the law. I just gravitated towards the law. Those were the kind of shows I would look at on TV. So now, it would be like Law and Order, I guess, and that kind of thing. And I always liked fashion as well. So fashion more than the beauty business, fashion. So I told my father very early o'clock, and I'm the firstborn in my family. I have one younger sister. And I told my dad very, very early that I wanted to be an attorney. I just loved the idea of arguing and winning cases as a little girl. And I'm talking very young now, at the start of what we call primary school in America. It's elementary school. Very early, and I never wavered from that. I always wanted to study law. Ironically, Janice, are you ready for this? When I was at university, and in the Caribbean, our system is very much like the British system. So, Americans do an undergrad in anything, and then you go to law school. our undergraduate degree is an LLB, a Bachelor of Law degree. So we do our undergrad in law, and then we go to law school for the practical part of the profession. And I, while studying for my undergrad, figured out early o'clock, I love law, but I will never practice law.
Well, listen, wait a minute though. Now, look, you won Miss Universe, and then you immediately took your final exams.
Yes.
What was that like, girl? I mean, because your whole world was changing, and
so I have to put that in context, Janice, because my first paid modeling job was when I was 11 years old. I had just started high school, what you would call middle school in the US. And I always enjoyed fashion, particularly. So I modeled hair for a long time, TV commercials, runway, all of it, you name it, print work, etc. in Trinidad, and a little bit in the Caribbean, beyond Trinidad and Tobago. And but I always liked law. And you know, I'm a good West Indian girl from a good West Indian family, which means there are only 3 real professions in the world. Now that has changed a little, but in my time, your options were doctor, lawyer, or engineer, in that order. Right?
So you went to the top of the pecking order.
Yes. Because that was, you know, very much a part of my upbringing, not only from my parents, but from everyone around me. My parents, to their credit, never insisted that my sister and I pursue a particular profession, but everyone else around us did. You know, their friends, everyone else around us, the media, everyone else around us did. And I always liked law, so it was easy for me. My sister, who's a year younger than I am, wanted everything under the sun: an astronaut at one point, an actuary, a fire officer like her father, like everything. You know, she eventually settled on finance, and she's a whiz. That said, the entry into pageantry was very much by chance for me. As I was modeling, as I said, from the age of 11, and I had a very good friend who was a fashion designer here, a stylist in Trinidad, Peter Elias. And we bonded over a Whitney Houston cover of Harper's Bazaar. Whitney, in I don't know what year this was, 1980 something, right? 89, I think it is, around there. Was on the or 1990 was around there. Was on the January cover of Harper's Bazaar in this bias cut Galliano gown that was to die for. I'm sure you remember that image of Whitney. It was absolutely ethereal, like nothing I'd ever seen before. Of course, I cannot afford a Galliano.
then
One, but because I always loved fashion, and not just you know, the modeling and being in front of the camera, I also made my own clothing. I took several sewing courses to the advanced level when I was in high school. I decided I needed to get that dress, and my buddy Peter and I bonded over that dress and my desire to have that dress, and he knew it was way beyond my ability. So he hooked me up with the right team to get it done. And that's where it started. He loved Miss Universe specifically. Not all pageants, just Miss Universe. To him, Miss Universe was the Super Bowl of pageants, or the World Cup of pageants. And he enjoyed it thoroughly. So every Miss Universe or Miss Trinidad and Tobago Universe from the 1990s were friends of Peter's. And the competition at that time was relatively small in Trinidad. You know, run by a fabulous woman who operated a restaurant here. And it's a small country of 1.3 million people. So she would handpick the delegates to participate in the local leg of the competition. And then whomever won, you went on. It was only 12 women, young women, competing at my time. And we were at the wedding of a friend when I was in university. And he said to me, you know, Wendy, you should really do Miss Trinidad and Tobago now. And he had been harassing me for years to do it. And I said, of course, Pete, I will, because I was having a little champagne and I was dancing up a storm and having a good time. And a few weeks later, I saw my name in the newspaper with a photograph of myself as a finalist in the Miss Trinidad and Tobago competition. And there was an open call to the media, the public, to meet the delegates in the Miss Trinidad and Tobago competition. Well, Janice, whiplash. what? Like, what? And then I called Peter because I knew he would be the only person to submit my photograph and my information to the organizers of the competition, to the organizer. It was that small at the time here, Kim Sabini. And he said yes, he did do that. And I made it to the finals of the competition, and I should show up at Kim's house next Friday. So the first thing I did, because at this point I how old was I? 23 or 24, somewhere around there. And I am in my final year of law school. And one of my girlfriends who had graduated before me, she was about 6 years older than I am, so she was practicing law already, said to me, Wendy, you are serious? You're about to graduate from your law school. You really think anybody's going to take you seriously if you show up in court when they've seen you in a bikini parading yourself around Port of Spain and the world? So that took me aback. And as I said, I wasn't totally on top of pageants. Fashion, yes, I knew fashion inside out, but not pageants. So I went to the registrar at school, a very stern woman named Miss Rochford, and asked her what she thought about it, because of course this is in a newspaper. Everybody knows that I'm a delegate to Miss Trinidad and Tobago now. And Miss Rochford surprisingly looked at me and said, darling, that's a great opportunity, go for it. So I went for a Janice, and that's how I entered Miss Trinidad and Tobago and then Miss Universe. Miss Universe, the Miss Universe competition at which I competed, was my second pageant ever in life. When I say I never attended one before, I didn't pay particular attention to it before. I showed up at Miss Universe as green as they come. But you know, your life experiences, Janice,
But green means you were fresh. Green means you were fresh.
And my life experiences prepared me, I now realize in hindsight, for that moment. You know, so doing moot court, where the law school, the Howroyd Law School, which I attended, would fly judges in from around the Caribbean to do moot court with us. As a law student, it is nerve-wracking to stand up in front of a judge, in front of all of your colleagues, and argue a case that you barely understand. Right?
And in so many ways, whether you're dressing for Miss Universe or you're dressing for that jury, you're preparing yourself
absolutely
to make a visual representation before you ever open your mouth. And we know that most circumstances engage people making a visual thought, perspective,
that's right,
or opinion before they get to even hear a
before
word
they
out.
hear you. You know, the example I use, and that's such an important point you've just made, Janice, that I use all the time when I'm speaking to young people, is Michelle Obama becoming the First Lady of the United States.
Yes.
You know, when President Obama was running for the presidency in the early days, you remember how the media gave her such a hard time? And once Michelle Obama, I think, and this is my theory, softened her eyebrows a little bit and appeared, not that she wasn't always witty, brilliant, fun, because those of us who were fans like me, early o'clock and admirers, appreciated her, but I couldn't understand the disconnect. And once she presented herself in a way that was more commercially acceptable to the Joe Public America, all of a sudden the same things. She changed nothing about her personality. Do a little experiment after our chat. Go back and look at very early videos of Michelle Obama and her expressions and what she said and her wit and her charm and her fun, her joie de vivre. Look at that then and look at now on her book tour. There's almost no difference, save and except the way she presented herself. You know, the way she speaks, her diction, her wit, everything is the same. You know, and often to hear you, people have to see you, is what I'm trying to say. So for me, that combination, the experience of law school, I have all the little tricks to whip myself together quickly. This is almost bare. I have mascara on only on my top lashes, but the red lips means that I didn't have time to do anything else.
Right, right. And I'm so glad of that, because both of us are coming to this conversation natural and comfortable. And I'm
Yes,
sitting here in my library having a conversation with you. I'm in my happy place. Wherever there are lots of books around me, I'm happy. You
yes,
you've given two really important pieces of advice, Wendy, so far. First of all, you shared the advice that was given to you, which translates to our audience, which is, basically people were telling you, go for it. Just go for it.
absolutely.
Don't worry about the legacy impact that you think people will feel from you deciding to do two things that seem completely opposite, when in effect you just happen to be a kaleidoscopically gifted person. um, and then you also talk, and I think we take lesson from your example of Michelle Obama, who you admire, who you said changed nothing about her person and her essence. It was who was preparing her for camera, who
Absolutely.
made her present in a way that people decided they would listen and have one opinion to, or listen, having another opinion. And we know that food is like that, right?
Yes,
You present the same cooked meal differently, and it can be appetizing or it can be unappealing. I think
absolutely.
I think that both of those give really good perspective for people, a point that we already, maybe points we already know, but that is good to reflect back on. What advice would you offer anyone seeking a career in law today? And in particular, what advice do you offer those of us who need to seek legal advice, whether that's from a personal level or as an
Yes,
entrepreneur needing counsel in their business? And, entrepreneurs need counsel for very many different reasons. At least they should engage them for very different reasons. But
that's right.
where's your general? I mean, those are loaded questions for you, but I'd love you to talk about it.
Well, I love those questions. Those are two very important questions, Janice, which I am rarely asked. So I appreciate it very, very much. And the first question you asked, someone interested in getting into the legal profession today, applies honestly across the board in any profession. You have to be very much on top of your game, and you have to constantly innovate. The world has moved away from the Industrial Revolution, right? We all know that. Innovation, creativity is where it's at. So doing the same thing in a very basic, monotonous way will not work moving into the future in any profession. As an attorney, you have to interpret laws differently. You have to be very creative and think outside the box constantly for the challenges that your clients will throw your way. And why? Because that's what lawyers do. Lawyers fix problems, right? They anticipate often, depending on the area of law you are practicing, problems, and you help your client, particularly business clients, get to where they want to go with as little friction as possible. And in today's world, that requires tremendous ingenuity and integrity. We're starting to move away from integrity as a species, and we are going to be whipped back into shape, I think, very quickly in that direction. Um, Integrity is so important to everything you do. Um, and for me, what has been my guide in that regard is my instinct. And what my instinct is my spiritual self speaking to my physical self. I believe that very, very firmly. If a little twitch in you is saying, it's usually right. That's your spirit talking to the physical you, right? Spirit talking
Yes.
to brain and saying, hello, check yourself. And in law, particularly, that is very, very important because your clients rely on you to keep them safe. And often in business, your clients will push as hard as they can. You'll have clients who will want to operate outside of and just within the parameters of the law. And so that's a very delicate balance. What I'm saying here is not easy. It's not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but that challenge should make the profession even more endearing to you as someone wanting to either get into law or already practicing law, because it's that delicate balance of being creative with the law, of being open, willing to learn new and think differently, but also operating within the parameters of what is ethical. That's very, very important for someone, for a practitioner, for someone practicing in this profession. And for your clients and for young entrepreneurs particularly, make friends with a lawyer. If you don't think you have the money now to afford one, most of the successful business people I know, and you are one, but most of them, for one of their children, their ride or die attorney is a godparent. And I'm not kidding.
True,
Particularly in business, having a very close professional friend who can guide you in that regard, who you can have those very difficult to have conversations with whenever, in the middle of the night sometimes, right? That's very, very important. And you can save yourself so much time, effort, and money if you don't cut that particular corner as a business
And I
person.
think, Wendy, while there is a lot of value we can gain from utilizing the internet, I think shortcutting using an actual licensed, smart practitioner to help you through circumstances, shortcutting that can wreak a lot of havoc. I mean, people
Absolutely.
think they can go online and read this or read that, but it really is a very complicated and quite intoxicating in some ways thing to understand that law isn't an isolated thing or an isolated section about this, that it
That's
can
right.
feed and inspire. And international law, since so much is occurring internationally for us by virtue of internet, may
That's
require
right.
more than one lawyer to assist you through a circumstance. I take for one moment, Wendy, to share with you that we do business with one particular client. We in many countries, or even in
Exactly.
one country, the law around, let's say, if it's a labor law, it can be very different from one state to another state.
That's
So I
right.
so I think I'd love you to just talk a little bit about the importance of not, I mean, utilizing the web is great, but not shortcutting the advantage of someone who can manipulate through the complexity of law.
That's right. Because, and particularly in business now, uh, the international community and politics or global administration is always a little bit behind the eight ball when it comes to catching up in commercial law, particularly, right? The law of business. And as you pointed out, that changes dramatically in various jurisdictions. Now, the internet may guide you if you are in California or Louisiana. A basic contract hiring an employee in your home state may be great, but that, the terms of even a simple agreement like that may be very different if you are doing something elsewhere. And labor law, your ability to conduct business based on your labor practices may change dramatically, state to state, country to country. There's so many intricacies that involved in operating trans-border, as you know. And the world now is trans-border, period. It doesn't matter what you're selling, what you're doing, you will find yourself in hot water, even as something as seemingly frivolous as an influencer on the internet. There's certain regulations that may obtain in one jurisdiction that do not in another. So if you physically required to show up in Australia from the US or Trinidad, because you've blown up on the internet doing X, Y, and Z, the requirements for you to do that change dramatically once you get off that screen,
Right,
and it's
right.
very important for you to know that, and that's what I mean by having a relationship with someone who has the know-how And even if they don't have the experience in another jurisdiction, they would know how to find it or find the resource you need. And that's very, very important in today's world. So just as much as an attorney or any other professional has to be willing to adapt, be very nimble, be always learning and innovating. As an entrepreneur, you have to as well. You know, the way we did things 10 years ago even has changed dramatically. You know, furthermore, taking it, the history, the learnings further back. So there's certain principles that stand the test of time, that always will, that always hold true.
And those laws are changing as well.
And yes, correct.
Having legal advice can be very helpful there. Let's go back to 1998 when you won the title of Miss Universe. You were the second Miss Universe from Trinidad and Tobago, and the third woman of African heritage to win the title. Take us back to that time, and what did it feel like, girl, to win Miss Universe? What was your life like immediately after that?
My life changed dramatically, Janice, the moment that crown was placed on my head. One, you really do become, you know, the queen of the universe in many places across this planet, and certainly to the company. I have to say that my experience working for the Miss Universe organization was amazing and continues to be. As a matter of fact, just 2 weeks ago, I was in New Orleans judging Miss Universe. And I've done so 4 times since. I've maintained a tremendous relationship with the company. Many of the persons who were just starting their careers when I won are now running the organization, and has changed hands a few times, but we are still very much a community. My country went nuts, right? And the Caribbean, and I must say, the African diaspora and the African continent generally. Now, as you said, I was the first, the first woman to win, Black woman to win Miss Universe during the explosion of the internet, as it were. So Janelle Commission, the Trinidadian who won in 1977, won it at a time when we couldn't even see her show live in real time, you know. We got the broadcast after the fact. And then Chelsea Smith, who is a biracial American, won in the early 90s. And Chelsea, a beautiful Texan, very popular, did not identify as Black herself, very much identified as mixed race. So my win, it was a combination of things, you know, in the heads of the global community, not the United States, and certainly not to take anything away from Chelsea, saw me as the second Black woman. One, and because I am not, I am a Black woman. Like, look at me, you know, a dark-skinned Black woman, and very proudly so. Highly melanated and rocking it, you know. And because so much of the world looks like me, and so much of the world that did not see themselves represented in anything that is aspirational and beautiful, to this day, you know, when I travel to the African continent or to Latin America or to Asia even, we don't even realize how many dark-skinned people, Black people there are in India, or you know, the Philippines or Thailand, or because that's not what those countries present to the world generally. But they're huge. You know, the Brazilians love me still. They have not forgotten. And that,
yeah, we even think about, and with Queen Elizabeth recently passing,
yes,
and the conversation started to come to fore for those who've not thought about it before, how much of the British crown is populated with people with rich skin tones,
yes,
you know, and when Harry met Meghan, you know, how the impact of that still happens. So when you think about even just, you know, short of a year, how people are still being amazed. In 1998, for you, yes, right. I get that the rich African diaspora would be so celebrating of that. It
But
had to have,
it was remarkable from the perspective that, and I think it's because I was the first title holder to wear the crown after the internet blew up internationally. So in the
yeah,
US, the internet started to take off in 1995.
yes,
1997 was when it started to really infiltrate the rest of the planet. So by 1998, like I was the first Miss Universe for whom there were like online what do you call it, like bets gaming,
yes. Uh,
a whole gaming operation, that kind of
mhm.
thing, and the world was able to live my year with me in real time. So unlike, you know, in the past where you would do an interview on American television or in Thailand or wherever, and you would see it a delayed broadcast or of that particular interview or appearance, the world lived my year with me in real time. So if I was doing politically incorrect in those days with Bill Maher, if I was on the world lived it in real time. And I think that's why, you know, I maintained a high level of popularity globally, even though to me, I've done nothing since that warrants the kind of attention that I get internationally. But I think it's largely because of that. It's because I was the first recognizable face in the beauty space right after the internet blew up internationally. And it has been tremendous. I mean, there are, like everything else in life, as you know, Janice, there are wonderful things about it and there are not. I choose to
Well,
focus on
yeah,
the
and it does.
wonderful things about the experience.
Well, one of the things, so much of it is wonderful, and I think in so many ways
Yes.
it's also an equalizer for people who have had inequities in their lives and their communities. And in our communities, here is something that that was quoted uh, from you after winning, and I'd love for our family to hear you speak on it, looking backwards. You said then, my goal will be to impress upon women that their struggle should not be for superiority over men, but for equality to fulfill our God given task of bringing up children, the future of the human race, together. You
I
said that
firmly
back
believe that.
then. Look back and tell us now. Would you still say that? And where was your mind then?
So I would still say that. Um, and because I firmly believe that the sexes should work together as we are meant to. Um, that's why it takes two of us to produce, right? To reproduce. Otherwise, either sex would be able to do it on their own, right? Is that not so? That said, the responsibility is not solely that of women. And I believed that back then, and I believe that now. This responsibility is of both sexes. So when I speak to raising our families, raising our kids to be whole human beings, that responsibility for me has always resided with both sexes. Um, we, as we often do as a species, when we oppress or stifle the growth of a section, a segment of our society, we can sometimes go overboard in correcting. But we eventually, so we go to the other extreme, but we eventually find our way back to the center, to a place that is not center so much as harmony, to a harmonious place where we are allowing ourselves to exist in of as we are fully. Does that make sense to you?
Does it does. And you know, today, Wendy, even on just the surface of it, let's think about this. How people self-identify, including gender identification, is a part of our lives in a very full way. And when
That's
we
right.
look at when we look at the world of beauty and fashion, oftentimes we're seeing how to elevate our esteem in ourselves by seeing ourselves represented through beautiful people like you. When I was
Exactly.
growing up, I saw Diane Carroll on a television show called Julia after I was
Yes.
at teenage. And before that, every depiction I'd seen of a Black person, when rarely I did get the chance to see them, was as a maid. So Julia was the first woman I saw in a white uniform doing a professionally paid job. When
Yes.
you do you see your position on the raising of children being fluent also in how fashion
Absolutely.
and beauty are able to impact us about how we see ourselves, as I mentioned, especially where we now have people who can openly, without without the hidden feelings they had about self-identifying, especially around gender.
Absolutely. So, and I want to be very clear on this. When it comes to showing up as our full selves, that I am 120 at least percent in support of. Um, I have so many friends who are either gender fluid or who are very sure of their um, who relate, who are gay, male or female, who are raising beautiful families themselves. And I'm very, what is the right word? The point I'm trying to make is that should be for me a non-issue. It's the when I spoke then and I speak now, it's the sometimes and what I have found, and Janice, your audience, and your family, you may differ in this regard, but I have found that particularly amongst gay community, that that desire to oppress one or the other partner in a relationship is not as pronounced as it is, for example, from my part of the world where I come from. We have been still struggling with the man-woman rule to a large extent. The US is much further evolved than we are in that regard, in terms of um, same-sex couples raising children, etc. Now, that is not to say that that does not exist in the Caribbean too, that you have same-sex couples having kids and raising healthy, whole families, but it is not as prevalent. When I speak in that quotation you read was specifically about the man-woman relationship and some of the difficulties we face in our part of the world and in the so-called developing world. Some of the practices that exist not only here, but in many of the places I traveled to during that year were very, very draconian and are still and in and often some of the oppression that women faced and continue to face um, because of cultural norms, largely, are handed down not by the men of the society. The men may dictate the pace, but by other women. you know, um, I speak specifically now about things like female genital mutilation, which is a real issue that I dealt with tremendously at that time and up to 2017 on my last trip to East Africa. I was still interfacing with young women who unfortunately had to experience that as a rite of passage. So that quotation deals specifically with those kinds of dynamics. Where I come from in the Caribbean, we have women leaders who are presidents of our countries. My current president is a woman. The Prime Minister of Barbados is a woman. My former Prime Minister is a woman. But often, none of those women have healthy or openly healthy relationships with men, save and except my former Kamla Prasad Bisesa, and her husband is highly accomplished in his own right, a doctor, etc. She was an attorney. But more times, more often than not, our men are not equipped to deal with a highly successful professional woman. So that quotation was strictly in the context of that dynamic. But to your point, I firmly believe that human beings should be, so one of, and I live it. I don't have to demonstrate it only in my words because I live it. My friends run the gamut. I have a son who is now 16. I have friends who are gay, straight, and otherwise. And the two couples when my son was younger that I trust completely with my child outside of my family were a couple who live in California, whom I've known forever, a gay couple who have the healthiest relationship of most of the married people I know. And I mean that very sincerely. They've been together now for 30 years, and I trust them 120. I met them as a couple. Very, very solid. And that's when my son was younger. And now one of the few places he can go without me or his dad, and vacation. And then another couple in Trinidad who were the traditional husband and wife couple, man, woman, Cynthia and Joe, with whom I trust him completely, spending time in their company, vacationing with them, etc. So when I live that that understanding and appreciating human beings for who they are, period. I don't define people, and I don't think anyone should, by their sexual preference. That's an important but one facet of who we are as human beings.
And whether that is sexual preference or gender identification,
correct.
It is important, I think, that you had the opportunity to expand on that and to bring that to where we are in 2023. You did
Absolutely.
mention that the United States may be in advance of some other nations in terms of this. There are many here who would say our laws are in advance, but our compliance still has great issues.
Lacking.
So
that's right.
So thank you for that, Wendy.
Well, we are behind in both law
and
compliance to some extent. Way behind we are laws.
Yeah,
compliance is a little further along even than our laws.
With you and many like you, I'm sure we are addressing that as well and have a better tomorrow than we do today.
But tell me, Janice, I have to ask you, don't you find it by living openly your truth? So I've learned not only children, but human beings are much better at following your example of doing as you do, as opposed to doing what you see. Right.
Well, that is why it's so, that is why I think you have such an incredibly important platform, and why I wanted your voice as well as your work to be hosted in this conversation we're having, because we get our images and we get our ideals from the media so often. Yes. The media may follow, it oftentimes does guide. As you may well remember, Wendy, I was going to say am married, because in my heart, Bernie is still present with me, to a white European male, a very, very British white European male. And he shared two things with me. One, he shared with me the dismay that even when we married, as late as when we married in the 1970s, that it would still be difficult, if not illegal, for us to travel as a married couple to some places in the world. The other thing he shared with me was more idealistic and more hopeful. He shared with me how music does change the world. And we see oftentimes in the fellowship to We Are the World through artists like Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie, and artists who many have their own faults, but collectively were brilliant in how they sought to lift the world forward and bring attention to places that needed attention. The Beatles, he said, you know them as those mop heads who came over when you were too young to pay attention. I knew them as social justice heroes. He said, we didn't label it that way. My husband was, 20 years older than I am. And he said, he grew up and the Beatles were heroes to them. They were stars to the rest of the world, but they really helped to break down some of the caste system of England, where England certainly has the opportunity, and the United Kingdom and its crown has the opportunity and gains advantage of that, quote unquote, advantage of that opportunity to express racism. He said in his small community in Northern England, everybody was white, and practically everyone was Norman Saxon, but it was a caste system, a class system that distinguished them. And it was a very hard
Yes.
earned exit if you happen to be on the lower end of the caste. And so when I see you and your work, Wendy, I get very excited about your ability to change, to impress, or even if you don't change circumstances, change minds that then teach to change circumstances. One of the goals, as a matter of fact, that you listed during that 1998 pageant we were talking about was toward the unity of the West Indies. Now, when you look
Yes.
25 years later, how do you see what's going on today in the West Indies compared to how it's been in the past years?
We've actually unification made some serious progress, thank goodness. But our politics, as usual, is playing catch up. So we do have, what we call CARICOM, which is our equivalent of the European Union, and it allows us mobility, working in each other's jurisdictions and that kind of thing. We are a trading bloc, but practically, we have a long way to go. And West Indians are very keen and open. The internet has certainly made it much easier for us to relate to each other, interface with each other. We enjoy each other's festivals, but traveling to these islands is very difficult. It's easier for me to buy a swimsuit from an Israeli designer, for example, and get it delivered to me in Trinidad via Amazon, than it is to buy a swimsuit from Barbados, which is a 45-minute flight away.
That's true for everybody.
Yes. So we do have a way to go still, but we are young in terms of our independence from the colonial powers that rule these islands. Relatively, none of us are over 70 years old. I think we're all around 60, between 55 and 65 years old, these islands. So our politicians
My goodness,
enjoy
your
flexing
islands,
their muscle.
your country is younger than I am.
Janice, you look absolutely fabulous. You should scream that from the mountaintop.
Well, no, Wendy, look, you and I both, I know that everybody's heard black don't crack, or as my mom says, well taken care of, black don't crack. But I think that you and I can redefine what 70 looks like. People have their own minds about what that should look like.
Absolutely. And this is one thing I will toot the horn of my people here. And that is the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, like the people of Brazil, I think. And it's largely because of our carnival culture. Because for at least 3 months of the year, from the day after Christmas, which we call Boxing Day, until what you would call in New Orleans Fat Tuesday, Mardi Gras, Carnival Tuesday for us, we have to be cute, right? Our costumes are tiny, Janice, tiny, tiny, tiny. Lots of feathers on our heads and off our backs and fabulous wings and things. But on our bodies, nothing. A bra, sometimes pasties.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And a few tassels hanging elsewhere. And we do that literally until we no longer have life in our body. The last time I had to put on a costume, she was 76 years old. She's now 85.
Oh, like
So,
La Josephine, like La Josephine. Hey, Josephine
like
Baker.
Josephine Baker.
Yeah. So, or like Wendy.
Yeah, oh, I
Hey,
like Whitney.
Wendy will be there. Wendy will be there one day. You know, Wendy, you do lead me to a thought though. You work as a host and you work as a judge for many international pageants, and you're the
Yeah,
executive producer for Caribbean's Next Top Model. Do
that's
you
right.
think your experience winning the title of Miss Universe in 1998 helps you have a different approach compared to other judges? And I ask you that because you didn't have a lot of experience modeling, as you've just shared with us. Your
Yes.
experience was more in owning yourself and the confidence that you had and the knowledge you had and the fearlessness you had. How do you use your personal experience to guide and coach those competitors so that each one of them leaves with a win in life, whether or not they win the crown?
That's a really great question. And you're very right. All of us see the world through our experiences. So having been through it myself, my approach is always, yes, to find the young lady, particularly when I'm judging pageants, to find the young lady who is most prepared and most ready to step into that role, but never, never, never to break anyone. Never,
Mm-hmm.
never, never to break any of the other young ladies, because always there can only be one winner in a competition such as that. And often you don't have the opportunity, particularly the final round level, if you're judging at that level, which I often am, to give advice to everyone individually. But when I do the preliminary competitions, as I did for Universe just a few weeks ago, and the final competition, the interview round, which is like speed dating, I always try to make sure that the young ladies leave my panel feeling whole, right?
Yes,
Even
yes.
if they are nervous, I spend an extraordinary amount of time putting them at ease, because we are often looking for someone who is comfortable in her own skin. And if a young lady shows up who is not, or who has been drilled into being a particular way, this is the way you do this, I try to find the essence of that young woman. And often 4 minutes is enough to do it. Within 3 minutes, you can get a good sense, particularly if the person is wildly nervous, get a good sense of who they are, break the ice a little bit, and then just before they leave me, share a little tidbit as to how to maintain that. That's authenticity is very, very important in that space, because particularly at that level, at the universe level, at your national competition level, everybody is gorgeous. What sets you apart is you. You know, no one can be a better Wendy than I am me. No one can be a better Janice. I can't do Janice better than Janice does Janice. You
Well, let
know?
me ask you something, Wendy. You know, when we say Miss Universe pageant, we think beauty pageant. Is it still a beauty pageant? And if so, is it a beauty pageant in the legacy way? I mean, you certainly have thoughts and feelings about the 2023 Miss Universe pageant. And this was the first year with an all female selection committee.
Yes.
Do you think that makes the panel look in any notable way at the essence of beauty today?
So I think because we the the essence of the pageant is still there. Um, and the pageant, the Miss Universe organization has evolved, just like the role of women in society has evolved over the years. So the ownership is new of Miss Universe. The focus coming out of the last few years, where the planet generally started by the US primarily in terms of respecting. So our role changed as women in society. You know, when Miss Universe started in the 50s, women were seen largely and not heard. Your whole goal in life was to marry well and be the perfect wife. And even though many of us still would like to do that, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, there's not one way to be. And the pageant now celebrates that there is not one way to be. So there is not an exclusion of what came before. There is inclusion of more. And when there is inclusion of more, you can feel sometimes some of the fans of the pageant feel like they're losing something, and you're not losing anything. We're just adding more to the pot. We've gotten a bigger pot,
Well,
and we're adding more.
You talk about that bigger pot and doing things differently. Certainly, you've done things differently than the legacy Miss Universe would have done. I mean, let's think about this. You wrote a book, Letters to Ellen, when your
Yes.
son was approaching 3 years of age. In the
Yes.
book, Wendy, you talk about your choice to become and remain a single mother.
That's right.
Why did this need to become a book? And what inspired you to write to your son?
Oh, so Janice, pre my son and pre my pregnancy.
By the way, I think everybody should read the book. Let me just do a shout out to the book, okay?
Yes, so and I will, and Letters to Elan, which literally is that, a series of letters to my son about my experience becoming a mom. I chose to become a single mother because I was in my mid-30s at the time, a professional, very ready to have a family. And both his dad and I felt that we were ready. His father for another child, when I met him, he was a single father, divorced, raising his firstborn from his marriage. And I knew in my heart that he was not ready for marriage, but we were both ready to start our families. And now this is very odd about me because I'm very traditional in some ways, and in others I am not. And it comes back to my upbringing and the fierce way in which my parents raised me. So my mom is a very traditional Catholic. Like, you know, she was not happy about me having a child outside of wedlock initially, like, oh. And my father, and I guess because
and they were married 10 years before they had you.
And they were married for 10 years before they had me. And but my father, in this regard, and perhaps a little bit more evolved because he was so protective of both my sister and I, but always a little bit renegade and a little bit more open-minded than mom in that regard. And that's probably why I chose to tell him about my pregnancy first. If you read the book, you know, I told my dad before my mom, which to this day she has a hard time accepting, right? And because I knew he would be much more, he was ready for a grandkid. So the first thing he said to me when I told him I was pregnant was, great, you know, you don't have to marry that guy. You marry him if you want to, but you don't have to marry him. And because my father is my hero, and I actually just lost my dad, Janice. I'm exceptionally wasn't. So I have a very hard time you speaking of him in the past tense, like you do your husband, because daddy was my wingman up until last week, Monday. Like we did everything together. I partied with him. The first time I had too much to drink was with him purposely. He wanted to make sure the first time I got intoxicated was with him, so nobody could ever take advantage of me. I'd understand what it felt like, and I would move on. I mean, like, just like the most amazing relationship. That said, I knew that I would want to raise Elan with his father and in community. My son must not be denied the opportunity to know his dad and his dad's family very well, and certainly mine and my village, as I call it. So Elan is a very well-adjusted kid, loves his both parents to death. And let me tell you, it was not easy.
Well, it's not easy for anyone,
It's not easy for anyone. We went through our paces, but we always kept our son topmost in our mind and our interactions with each other, particularly with him, you know?
Wendy, what is your favorite piece of advice from your book, if any?
Ooh, to be honest with our children,
Let's
both
pause
in
on that
terms
for a
of,
minute.
yeah,
Let's pause on that for a minute, because so many adults who are seeking psychological or psychiatric or emotional health counsel stem many of their issues back from things they felt weren't honest in their childhood.
absolutely.
That's powerful advice. Do you plan to write another book now?
Yes, I absolutely will. I absolutely, as I say to my friends all the time, I'm living book 2 now.
Well, I can
But
hardly wait for it.
because I want to tie the pieces together, Janice. Like I've had such an amazing experience, and you never know how things come back and how people circle back into your life. You know, the universe is very precise. And I think if we are open to it and all of its blessings, it works itself out. Once you have that drive, that focus, and when I say that drive, that focus, you may not know exactly what you want to do professionally. You may not know exactly where life is going to take you, but once you are focused on being authentic to you, it works itself out.
You
So
know, interruptions can teach us so much about ourselves. We talked earlier about COVID, and
yes.
you know, you became involved with the HIV/AIDS education and awareness, and the early days of that, I remember, were filled with not only confusion but many times lies
Oh,
or fears people had, and it was thought of as the gay disease, and then we
that's
learned
right.
it was a family disease and a community disease. Um, Talk about your work with HIV/AIDS. Although we've grown a lot
We have,
and we've
thank God.
achieved a lot,
But we
talk
do it
about
with
your work.
every new that the stigmatization of persons with many diseases. We used to do it with cancer before
Yes.
AIDS. We did it with
I
so many
remember
other
Betty
diseases.
Ford was the first person to step up in a broad way and it talk about breast cancer and
Correct.
change the
As if
way
it were your fault in some way you were bad. And because in our part of the world, unlike Europe, AIDS was largely a sexually transmitted disease. It was not as a result of intravenous drug use, but a sexually transmitted disease. You know, there's so many taboos around sex in our communities across the planet. We love having it. It's such a big part of who we are as human beings. It's a tremendous force, otherwise we would not be here. But for many of us, our faith teaches us that sex is dirty or ugly or something that you only do to procreate, which we know is absolutely not true, right? Because we talk the talk, but I have yet to meet a human being who walks that walk, right?
wow.
Okay.
Wow,
Uh,
Wendy.
so because it was a sexually transmitted disease, um, the stigma was even greater because you were perceived as loose, dirty, naughty in some way if you contracted HIV and ultimately AIDS. And my introduction to HIV started very early in the pandemic. I was still in high school in the mid 1980s, dating myself. In the mid 1980s, when HIV started to take off again across the world, and I lost a couple of very good friends in the arts to AIDS. And we didn't understand it in the Caribbean. Nobody spoke about it. You know, those deaths were tuberculosis, or this person got very ill for X, Y, and Z. And I didn't even know what AIDS was. And while I was a delegate in the Miss Trinidad and Tobago competition, one of the young men who happened to be very close to our national director, his father, who, and ironically, was a staunch Catholic, headed the Society of St. Vincent de Paul in Trinidad and Tobago, which is a Catholic organization that takes care of the poor and the elderly in the various parishes globally. He ran the Trinidad chapter, started a home for children living with AIDS who were orphaned. Nobody knew about this home in Trinidad at the time. We're talking about now 1997.
Mm.
No one knew this home even existed because it was so taboo here. If the neighbors where the society had set up this home knew that these children were living with HIV, they would have insisted that the home be shut down and run them out of the community. And so Robert, God bless him, asked the delegates, not as part of our competition, he had just become friends with a few of us, to visit the home. And I visited that home that afternoon, and we had no medication, nothing at that time to care for people living with HIV. It was a place with AIDS, sorry, it was a place for people to die with dignity, for these kids to die with dignity. And I visited that home, and as children do, because their parents were no longer with us, family didn't want them. The caregivers were amazing. These women were not just there to provide a meal, but they cared for these children as their own. And they were so sweet and loving. And I just fell in love with a couple of them. And I was in my final year at law school at the time, and my law school was not far from the home, and the home didn't have any permanent transportation. None of the staff had transportation or vehicle, and I drove. I had a car. So I would go to the home if any of the kids needed to be run to the hospital or anything like that, or they needed to run out and pick up anything. I just started to spend a lot of time at that home before I competed in Miss Trinidad and Tobago. And, you know, it bothered me the way even our nurses would treat the children at the time, very differently to the other children at the hospital, you know, on the AIDS ward, as we call it. Because they had AIDS, everybody was afraid to touch them, etc. And we knew at this point that this disease could not be transmitted by just physical contact. We knew this. And yet there was still so much stigma attached. So I was doing this very quietly, and one of our only, in those days, paparazzi in Trinidad, this one photographer who worked with, he was a freelancer for all of our daily newspapers. We had 3 daily newspapers and 4 weekly newspapers, the more tabloidy. And he photographed for all. And because so months later, I become Miss Trinidad and Tobago, about a month before I leave the country to go to Miss Universe in Hawaii. He lives on the same street, I didn't know this, as this home. And he saw me going into the home. So he took pictures of me going in, and I just paused, like, hi, Andre, and I went my merry way. But he did his homework and found out what the home was about, and he wanted to publish a story on it. And I begged him not to do it, because I knew what that would have meant for the children at the home who were now interacting with the kids next door, because this home is in a community, you know.
Yes.
And I begged him not to do it. And he made a deal with me. He said, okay, I won't publish anything. I won't publish these pictures. But if you win Miss Universe, we're going to have to tell everybody. And I was like, I took the deal. I said, sure, Andre, what are the chances of me winning Miss Universe? 1 in 85. Wow. So I said, sure. And he didn't publish the story he was planning to sell to the newspapers. And a month later, I win Miss Universe. And he, of course, ran with the story, and the resident representative for the United Nations in Trinidad used it as an opportunity, because he did this story about the fact it wasn't just, oh, Wendy visits these kids. He's like, Wendy has been visiting these kids forever. You know, she has a great relationship with these children. And I used it as an opportunity when I came home for my homecoming to ask the media, who were delightful, and our corporate citizens, the companies in Trinidad, were all doing these full-page advertisements in the newspaper. Congratulations to our girl Wendy, drink whatever. Congratulations to our girl Wendy, buy your furniture at. And I asked our companies I appreciated very much the love they were expressing, but if they could take the money they were spending on ads celebrating me, or at least match the money they were spending on ads, the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars they were spending on ads celebrating me, if they could match that, every ad they run, put that money, the equivalent, towards the Silros Nursery for these kids. And that's where it started. That's how I created my foundation, because the organization started to write checks to me as opposed to the home. So I needed to organize it. And
And it allows you to make sure that the money is going fully to the cause you support.
absolutely, absolutely.
I think
And
that's so beautiful.
so
And
that's how it started, and I lived it. These kids. So one of my prizes as Miss Universe was 10,000 US dollars, which was a lot of money in 1998, worth of Sprint phone cards. Because we didn't have international mobiles then. Our mobiles worked where we were generally. You had to have a satellite phone to be able to roam the planet with a mobile phone in those days, and it was as huge as a brick. And as heavy as a brick. So Sprint was one of my sponsors, and they gave me phone cards. And all of the companies that sponsored the Miss Universe pageant, I asked them to meet the spend they were spending on me by contributing to this home, and many of them stepped up to the plate and they did it. And that's beautiful. Where it started. And so the first place, like my son was born in the United States because his dad lives in the US. And I lived in the US for a period of time. And the first place we visited when we returned to Trinidad was the Sir Ross Nursery. It was a home for these children living with AIDS. And I also started a program to bring in the medication, the antiretroviral drugs. I remember Magic Johnson had just come out as HIV positive at the time as well. And the UN had made me a Goodwill Ambassador. And my High Commissioner during my year, the Consul General to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, based in New York, asked me, he had a little party for me for my birthday because I was in New York at the time. And he asked me at the party what I want for my birthday. And be as frivolous as you want, Wendy. Me and the people of Trinidad will give you whatever you want. And I was like, well, ding, 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 because I had met with the pharmaceutical company that was making the antiretrovirals. And at that time, it cost about $5,000 a month for the drugs for these kids. So I said to him, I want you to get me the same drugs Magic Johnson is on for my children.
Yes, 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 yes.
And my birthday is early October.
Yes.
And he was like, ooh. He's like, I thought you would want like some beautiful piece of jewelry or something. I was like, no. I want the antiretroviral drugs that Magic is on. I want the best. Whatever he's getting, I want for my kids.
Wendy.
But Janice, and this is what I mean by the universe.
Yeah.
When you want something badly enough, you work at it, conspires to get it for you. He found a way. So my birthday is October 4th. By January of the next year, he called me to his office and introduced me to a young woman who had set up an NGO in New York City of Trinidadian parentage, who was collecting the antiretroviral drugs that persons in the New York area could not use. Because, it was a combination of drugs. You had to take a cocktail of drugs in the early days. And if it didn't work, these clinics would give you a 6-month supply of your drugs, and then you can't use it, but the clinic can't, and it's not expired. So she would take the unexpired medication and send it to Latin America. And she's like, I didn't know of an organization in the Caribbean doing this. I said, well, my home does it. And so we had a wonderful meeting at his office, and we didn't have even the infrastructure to ship medication to the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. But he made it happen. Mm-hmm. Our first few shipments, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, went in his diplomatic bag. Right? Well, we got a pediatric doctor, a Trinidadian again, who was educated in the United States, running a clinic and hospital system in Brooklyn, New York, to come and train our doctors. And this went on for 10 years. He would come every 6 weeks, work with our nurses, work with our doctors, and conduct clinics. And that just happened because I said, for my birthday, I want the drugs Magic is on.
Well,
and we put a whole
girl,
clinic system developed as a result of that.
We have to pray and stay that you have many more birthdays, because you continuously, no. I mean, I know we're having fun, and I'm feeling this sister love for you so strong, this mother love for you so strong. But you're not only a stunningly beautiful woman, you're incredibly beautiful person. You've done this work with HIV/AIDS, and we're posting your book as well as your foundation, because each of them are so valuable to people. you've also been appointed as Red Cross Ambassador for Youth for the Caribbean, and you've worked with organizations promoting the development of diversity in your country.
Oh, yes.
What is your vision for the future of Trinidad and Tobago on the world stage? And what thoughts do you have about the Caribbean region as a whole?
Ooh. So my thoughts now, my country is, or my wish rather, Janice, for my country is that we continue to innovate and evolve. We are, as a country, Trinidad and Tobago specifically, getting a little bit lazy. We've done very well. We've had energy resources and not much of it, but enough and enough innovation. We were the first country in this hemisphere to commercialize natural gas. When everybody else was flaring gas to get to oil, America, Canada, Venezuela, everybody else, we turned it into something to generate electricity and as a feedstock for other petrochemicals and blah, blah. And that innovation carried through to other things we do, our food processing, etc. I am seeing now a malaise setting in with my people, and I really want us to get over that. We are innovating in other areas, and I want us now, with the same enthusiasm and gusto we developed our energy sector and our light manufacturing sector, to develop our innovation, our animation sector, our fashion industry. There's so much that we do well that we are not as aggressively pursuing. And what that will do, because when it comes to the culture, I mean, we have a little song that goes, I don't mean to be bossy, but you can party like way. Because we have a good time. We know how to have a good time. We know how to celebrate each other. I'm not worried about that aspect of us. We incorporate our faith into our party, into that we have on lock, right? What we do not have on lock, and which worries me, is our economic development to ensure that our society continues to grow and we don't have a brain drain. We don't have people like my son and his peers leaving and never coming back. That I'm worried about.
Well, you mentioned a little bit about animation, and I'd love you to tell our family a bit about TTAP. That's the Tamana Technology and
Yes.
Animation Production Factory. Now, as I understand it, it's an animation hub, which I think may be so cool. So, what are you doing with TTAP?
Oh, Janice, you've done your homework.
Well, I told you I'm a fan of yours. And, Wendy, for you to make such an outstanding impact, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but the whole world. I mean, you yourself talked about the advantage of the internet and how it launched your crown differently than it did the two before you. This is an opportunity for you to talk about that, because you don't talk about yourself. You are always talking about the work that others can do, that you've learned about, and how to move that forward. And so if you don't mind, I really would love you to just talk about that a little bit.
I would be happy to, because I'm very excited, by that project, for which I started consulting a few years ago. The University of Trinidad and Tobago has an animation program now for the last 15 years. It's been doing very well training animators. And what Tap Factory does is we are an animation hub, an animation studio that provides support to the industry internationally. So we are now creating and making money for our nationals.
Creating and earning money.
Earning money.
Don't
Correct.
start
Not
making it.
Yes, we're earning it. Thank you for that correction. That's a very important correction. And earning money. We do have a couple of small animation studios here that do very well internationally with the right clients. But we want to make sure that there is more of that, and that those studios are able to blossom and grow and take advantage of some of the big opportunities internationally. Now, again, our background as a very technically sound, savvy culture, we are English speaking, we are on the same time as the Eastern Seaboard of the United States for most of the year, but we're technical and very creative. And that's a winning combination for animation. And so we do animation very, very well. Our clients now come out of the Far East primarily and out of India. And we are slowly making our way back to our part of the world, building our strengths, our capabilities, so that we can tackle the big companies directly. Because right now, the outsourcers outsourced us, which is how you build credibility, which is how you build, because the talent is one thing, but as you know, building a business, you have to have the rigor, particularly in an industry like animation, where there's no room for mistakes, and the and the ability to turn work around 24/7 on a dime efficiently, very, very important. We are there now, I'm happy to say. So we are working on some very, very exciting projects. I am what I call a glorified sales girl to a large extent, but also structuring the deals we've done, structuring the studio, both from our incoming clients internationally, but also from the animators, the young animators here, creating the content locally to push out and creating interesting stories about us, not only Trinidad and Tobago, but the wider Caribbean, to push out to the wider world. Because if it's one thing about my part of the world that we can do a little bit better, is present ourselves. And that's why Top Model was so important. That's why this animation project I'm so excited about as well.
Well, it's
Caribbean is often interpreted, Janice, by somebody else looking in. There is very little content of us pushing ourselves out. The world doesn't see us as we see ourselves. The world sees us as the world sees us. But
yes,
our stories, our dialect, our pekong, as we say, which is the way we tease each other. That's pekong. Quite universal and quite fun. So everybody knows reggae, everybody knows Bob Marley and dancehall and Sean Paul and Shaggy. But you may not know the names of some of the Calypsonians and soca artists who come out of the region, but you know their music, hot, hot, hot.
yeah.
One of the biggest songs of all time, Who Let the Dogs Out? That was a big hit for Carnival in Trinidad before it was purchased by, the manager of that Bahamian group, the Bahamen. And there's so much more, and there are fun stories behind our music, behind our food, the origin of jerk chicken and jerk fish. There's like a wicked story behind that with the Maroons of Jamaica, etc., that I think the world would enjoy hearing and understanding. So that's the other aspect of what we are doing at Tap Factory, creating stories to push out to the rest of the world.
Well, I think it's just incredible. I mean, these last few years of quarantines and isolation have fueled many of us to rethink our priorities, and the innovation you speak to that you wish for your part of the world is certainly coming out of the work that you're doing in those organizations you value, Wendy. Are there any things you've shifted your thinking about for yourself and or the world over the last few years, due to the last few years, I may even say,
Absolutely. My shifting has changed, my thought processes, what is important to me, has definitely shifted post-pandemic and during the pandemic. I always valued family, but I value family and my relationships and my experiences so much more. Things are lovely, but not nearly as important as they were pre-pandemic. When Jane Fonda said,
Wendy, let me ask you this very quickly. Please don't lose your thought. Let me ask you this, girl. So you said things are important, but not nearly as important. And, it'll be interesting to see how long it takes us to get back pre-pandemic in our mindsets and behaviors. But you particularly, being a person who embraces, creates, understands, and expresses fashion.
Yes.
How much of that fashion were you really using that you had collected over these last few years?
Girl.
During COVID? How much of it was just from here to here?
Most of it during the pandemic was from here to here. What you're seeing now, was it? But because I enjoyed it so much, and we were under serious lockdown, like Australia type lockdown, like we
Yes,
couldn't
yes.
leave our various communities for 6 months at a time and go to various parts of the country. And because my parents were older, I didn't want them going out, so I would do the shopping for them, and I would make sure they have their, you know, their fresh fruits and veggies every week and that kind of thing. And I remember going to my mother's house and mommy saying, Wendy, where are you going? I said, Mom, I'm here to drop off your fruits and veggies. She's like, why are you and my grandson dressed up? Because I had on my fiercest, most beautiful Louboutins and a very cute little simple outfit. And I had not put on makeup at that point because this was very early in the pandemic for about 3 months. I was in full drag, Janice. The eyes, the everything, the hair, done. Okay, done, girl. And my mother could not, my mom could not believe that I was being disciplined and going back to my house. She's like, I swear you're going to one of these naughty COVID parties that I hear these Trinidadians. I said, no, Mom, I'm going home. I'm being a good girl, but I'm just tired of sitting at home in sweats. You know,
But it shifted you, didn't it? I don't know that it
shifted me
pivoted any of
entirely.
your work, but it
It
shifted.
shifted me from the perspective that, you know, I have a lot of beautiful things because of what I have done in my life. There are many things. So yes, I work in the corporate sector here, but I've also worked in entertainment over the years, etc. So you acquire things, and that's what I mean. Like, I don't need any more things. I'm very clear on that.
Yeah.
You know, so for like holiday, I enjoy giving, and I've always enjoyed giving much more than I do receiving. I'm not very gracious at accepting things. I've never been good at that. It's gotten worse during the pandemic. So, you know, like for Christmas, for the last couple of years, my very close friends, I insist that they give me their time. I have this one girlfriend who lives in central Trinidad. She rarely comes to town. She's my buddy, but she's become a phone buddy over the years. So I've insisted for the last 2 years that for my Christmas gift from her is a day or a weekend with me. We will do whatever I want, but I just want the time. You know?
I have a dear Wendy, my dear friend Francine Lafrac has offered me well in front of COVID to come and just spend time with her, whether in New York or her home in Connecticut. And she is someone I value so much. And creating that time to do that, I'm now beginning to feel as though, have I really disrespected that tremendous offer to bring me into her home by not finding that time? It is now my commitment to find that time. And it's so awesome you say that.
And that becomes much more important, don't you find so, Janice? Like post-pandemic, we are more acutely aware of that. We're more acutely aware of our relationships. My family is a very loving family. Like we never get off the phone and say and not tell each other we love each other. Even if I have an argument with my parents, they will say, Daddy will say to me, I may not like you now, Dee Marcel, but I love you. Bam, and you put down the phone.
Yeah. And you know, those Zooms that we did as a family, there are 8 siblings, right, of us. I have 7 who are still alive now, and my mom. And just meeting with each other over COVID and having our Sunday dinner Zooms and, you know, checking in on each other. In some ways, we became closer and more responsible, I should say, even more wanting to be present together than before COVID. You know, will we get to hug each other again? Those are still recent memories for so many of us.
That's right. And I don't think we will take that for granted. I don't think this generation. So I have to give you quickly a little story. My mother's aunt, who is still alive, and not only alive, she is thriving and fabulous, but she's 104 years old. So she was born in 1918. She was here for the last pandemic. She remembers going to school in Trinidad with a mask on. Okay. And she said those memories never leave you. The importance of family, the importance of you cherish those things. As she said, she's 104 now. She survived another global pandemic. And she says, you know, Wens, what you are saying to me, I lived it. I lived it before, and that's why you are so important. That's why I check in with you at 104. I speak to my aunt at least twice a month pre-pandemic. Now, every week.
Yes, yes,
We
yes.
hang out. My son, who is now 16, but thoroughly, because she's so smart, whip smart at 104, enjoys her company. I would take her out on a Friday night to have a drink with me and my child. You know? And it's because we will not take those relationships. I think this generation will take each other, will not take each other for granted as much as we did in the past. I'm
Not take each
hoping
other
that
for
out of the,
granted.
you know, the angst and the anger, the uncertainty comes kindness, a little more kindness, a little bit of humility, just a little more attention to each other. I
And
really,
they are, and Wendy, they are requiring those of us who are employing them to be that way as companies as well. They are
yes,
making it very clear every day. My teams tell me how it rises up higher and higher, stronger and stronger, that people who are looking for work are prepared to decline work in companies they don't value as valuing, whether it's the environment or each other or
that's
whatever.
right.
It's very high on their list of priorities. I
Yes,
got two more questions I got to ask you before we go to
absolutely.
4 for 4. I'll ask them together and you answer them however you want. Okay.
Sure.
I got to know, the family has to know, what person has impacted you the most in your life. I mean, we hear your
Oh,
obvious love and respect for your parents and for your dear auntie, but who has impacted you in that way? And tell us a little bit about your goals between now and 2025.
20.
Last two questions.
Okay, great questions, Janice, and hard to answer. There are two people that I tried to emulate. One is Nelson Mandela. I had the opportunity to meet him in 1999 and spend time with President Mandela in South Africa. And what an amazing, genuine, confident yet humble human being. I see him as otherworldly. A tremendous amount of respect for that man and how he was able to steer his country through a very difficult time. And his legacy lives on, because he embodied what I think is lacking in many of our leaders now. And that is a true sense of empathy, understanding the next guy, even the guy oppressing you and trying to kill you. Right.
Yes.
And not being silly, never stupid, but understanding firmly that there is a marked difference between kindness and stupidity. And you can be confident and kind. You can be very firm, very strategic, very focused and kind. I've learned so much from Nelson Mandela, from reading, everything he's written, from just following him, from that time, those 2 weeks I spent in South Africa, and the opportunity, because he was giving up the presidency at the time, he was stepping down as president, and allowing me the opportunity to visit various communities with him, that I will cherish forever. So he's one. And number two is a fabulous woman.
I will tell you, Wendy, I will just tell you, I share with you that awe, that awe, and that not just the inspiration, but the teaching, as you said, having visited his jail cell and his home, never having met him. I don't know how much of what my emotion and my spiritual evolution I took with me, that into that space that I wanted to have, and how much was there and greeted me. I will tell you that it was quite it. And I think most people share that. You're not quite the same once you've done that. And what
Yes.
you're expressing is even on another level. Thank you.
Oh, that time, I mean, I genuinely appreciate that so much, having had the opportunity to not only meet him, but spend time with him and see him in action, see him working and getting his
Did you
community.
cry? Did you cry after you met him? I mean, in the presence of him, I'm sure you were just, oh, but did you cry
It
at
was
that?
very emotional, but he
Yeah.
was so unbelievably down to earth. And he had done his homework. He knew everything about me, my
Yeah,
parents, my
yeah,
sister.
yeah,
Um, and we had such a good time together. He had me laughing constantly that we forgot to take a photograph together. So he
yeah.
called my hotel that night because I was in Johannesburg and asked me if I could please do him the favor of coming back to see him tomorrow, but unfortunately not in Joburg, in Pretoria to take a. At first, I thought it was somebody playing a trick on me. I thought it was my same consul general who had accompanied me to that on that trip to South Africa. I said to him, Terry, stop playing the fool now. You're really Nelson Mandela. And he was like, no, Wendy, I am, this is Nelson. He called me himself. He picked up the
Yeah,
phone and called my hotel
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
ask
yeah.
me because, you know, he knew I had a tight schedule. He also had a tight schedule. And if I could please do him the honor of coming back and having and having a photograph of.
Great people understand simple pleasure.
Yes. And,
Yeah.
and 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 that's where, and I think because we made that little faux pas, we didn't take a photograph together. That's where it started. So of course I made my way to Pretoria the next day, and then I had the opportunity to visit a village with him. He was doing a lot of work, as I said, both in terms of giving up the leadership of the ANC, but also in HIV. And even as Madiba, you know, in South Africa,
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela was one
Right.
rung below God. There's God,
Yeah.
Mandela, and the rest of humanity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even there, a lot of the community leaders, the tribal leaders, etc., were having a very hard time accepting what was required to get South Africa beyond their AIDS crisis at the time. You know, even Mr. Mandela was struggling, and I spent a little bit of time with him on the road in that regard, and it was unreal to see how he was able to understand, you know, with tremendous humility, but always in that voice, in that there's a tremendous level of, as I said, empathy, understanding, yet confidence. This is what we
And
must do. Are
this,
you going to join me? Us,
yeah, yeah,
we.
yeah.
It was never me, I. Never, never, never. It's just always, I am one of you. This is for you. I have to make very difficult decisions for you.
Wendy,
Please.
Wendy, this is the paradoxical thing for me. And how the world, and I will speak, you spoke about your country, my country, the United States. How could we speak of admiration for this man and disrespect his country so? Anyway,
Because we're very good at dissecting, we're very good at separating these things in our brains as human beings.
so what goals have you got between now and 2025? And then
Oh.
we'll play. Then we play our game.
Oh, so my goals between now and 2025, in terms of the profession, I've just started, Janice, a new career, basically, a portfolio with a group of companies based in Trinidad, but a global group, regional, we're the Caribbean, Africa, and Europe. And I chair this group of 17 active companies. We're in gaming, we own casinos, restaurants, security companies, and a couple of mining operations, and I'm enjoying it tremendously. So my short-term goals are to get a handle on the businesses I run, to expand our restaurant businesses, particularly in the Caribbean, and to ensure that the nationals that I am steering here, particularly, grow tremendously and grow internationally. That aspect of what I do with the founder of the company, who was born in the UK but is Trini to the bone, I'm enjoying tremendously. Personally, I'm making some serious changes. My son goes to school in the US. He's at boarding school in Rome, Georgia. And he wants to go to university in the US. You know, as I said, his dad is American and Jamaican. And Alan is as well. And I think he would want to move into his father's business after. So I am making some massive changes in terms of my professional life. And in the next 2 years, I expect to be, I will downsize in Trinidad to some extent. It's just me. I don't need a massive home anymore in Trinidad, but I want to live on a beach. And I love Barbados. So I am revamping things at home. So I spend more time with my mom. And I will likely be, the next time we chat, Janice, you'll have to come and visit me in Barbados.
I look forward to it and I accept it as an invitation.
And it is indeed an invitation.
Oh, wonderful.
And I'm going to hold you to it.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you ready to go 4 for 4?
Let's do 4 for 4.
Okay, Wendy, I'm going to ask you 4 questions. You'll give me 4 answers to each. There are no right or wrong questions. And the first one is, you're hosting a dinner. Your guests can be anyone past or present. Who's going to be at your table?
Ooh.
And why? And why?
And why? At my dinner table, if I'm hosting a dinner for 4, anyone, I would love to have, you ready for this?
I'm ready, girl.
I'd love to have Bob Marley.
Yes.
Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Muhammad.
Ooh.
And Cardi B. Now, I know that sounds a little bit odd, but Cardi B is such a bright woman and is so representative of her generation and what is happening with our young people now. If you listen to her very carefully, that's a very, very bright young woman, and uses her physical to really step up the game of her peers and of her generation. Christ and Muhammad, because I'm sure they would be horrified at how we behave in their names. And therefore, I would want them to set us straight, right? And Bob Marley, because he's beautiful, and I would love to look at him, and also brilliant. And I know he would be able to translate whatever the new and improved messages that Christ, Muhammad, and Cardi have for us in a way in which it is most universally accepted and digestible.
And we may even get to listen to him a little bit with dessert.
Absolutely. He's not only going to provide the entertainment, he's also going to be able to write what comes out.
So listen, I'm gonna change the rules for you. You get to have 5 dinner guests if I can be the 5th at that
time. Absolutely.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, let's go 2 for 4.
Yes.
What music are you listening to now and why?
Oh, okay. So honestly, straight up, I am in full soca mode, which is the music of Trinidad and Tobago, because our carnival, which is one of the best festivals on planet Earth, happens in just 2 weeks. So we generally don't hear anything else at this time of the year. But as I said to you, I recently lost my dad, so I'm listening to all of his favorite music too. And his music runs the gamut from Nat King Cole to Stevie Wonder, a lot of Stevie Wonder, a lot of Down and Dirty James Brown, everything that Daddy loved. But it's soca and everything my father listened to that I'm listening to right now.
Beautiful, beautiful. And by the way, those who you mentioned your father listened to tend to be quite trending and current today for the messages in their music. So that's truly amazing.
Yeah. Timeless. Those gentlemen are timeless.
Oh, yeah. So Wendy, we're going 3 for 4.
I'm ready.
What 4 books do you recommend to our family listening right now, and why?
Oh, Michelle Obama's most recent book, which I just acquired. I'm dying to read it. I so enjoyed Becoming. And Michelle Obama is so easy, yet deeply thoughtful. But the way in which she delivers her life's messages, it's an easy read. So definitely, Michelle's new book. I also recently acquired Spare by Prince Harry, which everyone is buzzing about and talking about, but it is really an excellent introspective, and hopefully it will move all of us, not just the British population, but all of us in terms of hierarchy and how we see each other forward as a species, as this species human significantly. There are lots of lessons in that book that I think we can take always. For me, don't kill me for this, but I'm also reading my Bible cover to cover, because there's a lot in there that no one faith explores. And and because I was raised Catholic, I think all organized religion sort of skews you in the direction of wherever they want to go, because they are man-made to a large extent, and all have agendas. So I'm reading my Bible cover to cover, so that I have my own opinion on the Bible, period. That's why. And I'm also reading another book, I'm about to, which I'm a big fan of Rachel Maddow. And this you may not know about me, Janice, but I enjoy thoroughly politics, the intrigue of politics, the excitement.
Oh, we'll do another conversation on just politics then. Wow. Yes, that'd be awesome.
I can wax warm for hours on end. And Rachel Maddow wrote a very interesting book called Blowout, which has been around for a little while. That sort of, and because I have worked in the energy sector, the impact of oil and how oil and gas informs the politics of almost every country on this planet, and how influential the energy sector has been on the politics, who's in power, who's not. It's insane. And she's so well researched always, that I'm very much looking forward to reading her book, very much. So that's where I am.
Thank you. So listen, Wendy, girl, we're going 4 for 4. Okay.
Number 4, make it good, Janice. Make it good.
Oh, girl, look, you answering, it's going to be good, sister. Let me tell you, it's going to be good. I am just so enjoying our conversation, but I do have to go 4 for 4 with you now. Give us 4 pieces of advice that you think will be quite timely and important for our family. And if it is advice that was given to you, please show homage to the person who gave it to you and let us know who that was.
Sure. So, I've received great advice over the years, and there are a few things, a few pieces of advice that I hold dear. Some of them are quotations from books I've read, but many from the people in my life or people I admire. One is, and I think it's very important for this time we are in, Nelson Mandela's quotation, read drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I love that.
Repeat that. Repeat that. Wow.
Resentment is like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die. You're harming yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So the importance of dealing with situations, with people who may have wronged you, whatever your angst may be, deal with it and get over it. If you don't, it manifests, it becomes a cancer and takes over your life, either literally or figuratively. So that's one that I live by. Because as you know, you get older, there are knocks coming and going, and you have to be able to move beyond those. And that is one that I have found that has helped me to move beyond. Another one that I love is from Diane von Furstenberg. And she said, the most important relationship you will ever have in your life is the relationship you have with yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
I love that, because that helps you in the good times to stay grounded and focus. And it also helps you in the difficult times to remember that that will pass and you will get over it. And one comes from my mom, which is nobody pelts stones at a barren tree.
Right.
Which is very West Indian. It's very Caribbean, and I think it's an old African proverb. If anyone's unreasonably criticizing you and trying to pull you down, it's likely because they see a deficiency in themselves in your greatness. You manifest something that they would like, that they want, and instead of aspiring to, they're trying to take it from you.
Mm-hmm.
So that has always helped me to focus and push forward, and sometimes celebrate a little dig or two. Because a little dig that comes out of left field often means you're doing something right. Is that not true? And then my fourth is from my son, surprisingly, and perhaps because of what I am living right now, having recently lost my dad, who used to like to fix everything, but would never come over to my home just to hang out, Janice. Daddy had, as the kind of man who always had to have a purpose to go anywhere and do anything. And I loved hanging out with him. So I would want him to come over to my home every Saturday or Sunday to hang out. And he would always have an excuse unless I had something to do. If I had something to fix in the house, a light bulb, my machine, something broke down, the electronic gate wasn't working properly, whatever. And my son looked at me and said, "Mom, well, just have something to fix. If you, and that can be translated to anyone, anything, any situation. It's that outlook. It's that, you want grandpa to come over and hang out with us. This is what grandpa needs to be able to do that. Adjust yourself accordingly. Be flexible enough. Think it through, Mom. Have something to fix. And that I always have something to fix now, not only as it relates to my dad and my son, but generally, adapt. And if I really need to, whether it's in business, in my personal relationships, have something to fix. Make sure that you are speaking to that person in their language, in a way in which they can understand you.
Perfection. Wendy Marcel Fitzwilliam, thank you from my heart to your home.
Oh, I'm so happy to have had this time with you. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.